The first sign that something was wrong came from a weather satellite near Jupiter. It stopped sending data at 0314 UTC. 3 minutes later, every deep space sensor humanity owned lit up at once. Something huge had entered the solar system, and it had not asked for permission. Fleet Admiral Sarah Cade was asleep when the call came. She had been asleep for only 2 hours after a 16-hour shift at Earth Defense Command, buried deep under the Rocky Mountains. When her communicator buzzed, she did not need to look at the screen to know it was bad news. Good news never came at 4 in the morning. "Admiral, you need to see this," said the voice on the other end. It belonged to Colonel James Okafor, her second in command and one of the few people she trusted completely. "Something just dropped out of warp near Jupiter. It's not one ship. It's a fleet." Sarah sat up in bed and rubbed her eyes. "How big?" "Big enough that our sensors think it's a small moon at first." Then it corrected. 91 ships, Admiral. The smallest one is the size of an aircraft carrier. The biggest one is the size of Manhattan. "Get me to command, now." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the middle of Earth Defense Command, a huge round room filled with screens, desks, and worried faces. The main screen showed a slow, grainy image of the alien fleet, captured by a telescope on the far side of the moon. The ships were shaped like long blades, dark red and black, with strange markings along their sides that looked like they had been burned into the metal rather than painted on. "Talk to me," Sarah said, walking to the center console. A young analyst named Priya Sharma looked up from her screen, her face pale. "Admiral, they're broadcasting. On every frequency we use, and a few we don't. It started 5 minutes ago. It's on a loop." "Play it." Priya's fingers moved over her keyboard. The main screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was not a human face. It had gray-green skin, stretched tight over a skull that was too long and too narrow to be human. Its eyes were black from edge to edge, with no white showing at all. 2 ridges ran from its forehead down over where its ears should have been, curling like horns. It wore dark armor with red trim, and behind it, other similar beings stood at attention. The alien's mouth moved, and a voice came out, deep and rough, translated a half-second later by the ship's system into something that sounded almost human, but flat and cold. "People of the third planet," the voice said. "I am Commander Vaskar Thren of the Zorath Dominion. I speak for the Dominion fleet that now stands at the edge of your system. You have built cities. You have built machines that fly between your stars, though clumsily and slowly. This we have seen, but you have never met another people among the stars, and so you do not know what that means for you now." The room was silent, except for the low hum of the computers. "The Dominion has a law," Vaskar Thren continued. "A young race that reaches the stars must prove it deserves to keep them. This is not cruelty. This is how every race in known space has earned its place, including my own, 400 years ago. You will be tested. If you fail, your people will join the Dominion as a client race, working under our banner, paying tribute, learning your place. If you refuse the test entirely, we will simply take what we want and leave the rest of you in ruins. This is also within our law." Sarah's jaw tightened. Around her, she could see the same anger rising in other faces, mixed with fear. "The test is simple," Vaskar Thren said, and for the first time, something like amusement crossed his stretched features. "Single combat, ship against ship, chosen by each side, at a location we will provide once you have accepted. Your best against ours. If your ship stands at the end, your people will be recognized as a true starfaring race, free and independent, and left in peace by the Dominion for 100 of your years. If your ship falls, you belong to us. You have 3 of your days to answer. Answer, or we will take your silence as a refusal, and act accordingly." The screen went dark, then began looping the message again from the start. For a moment, nobody in the room spoke. Then everyone spoke at once. "Quiet." Sarah's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room settled. "Priya, get me confirmed numbers on that fleet. Every ship, every reading we have. James, get me the Secretary General on a secure line. And get me every head of state who has ships in orbit right now. We are not making this decision in a vacuum." "Yes, Admiral." Sarah stared at the frozen image of Vaskar Thren's face on the screen, at the strange calm cruelty in his black eyes, and felt something settle in her chest. Not fear, though there was plenty of that too. Something harder. Something that felt almost like relief, because for the first time in her life, the enemy had made itself known, and an enemy that could be seen was an enemy that could be fought. 3 hours later, Sarah stood in a much smaller, much quieter room, facing a screen, split into 12 windows, each showing a different face. Presidents, prime ministers, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and General Marcus Reyes, the man who had spent the last 6 years building something that almost nobody outside this room knew existed. Let's start with the numbers, Sarah said. Priya, go. Priya's face appeared in a 13th window, her voice steady now, even though her hands trembled slightly on her keyboard. 91 ships confirmed. Sensor readings put their smallest vessels at roughly 200 meters, their largest at just over 4 kilometers. That large one appears to be the commander's flagship, and it alone could probably level a continent from orbit if it wanted to. Their weapons signatures are consistent with plasma-based cannons, and some kind of directed energy beam we don't have a name for yet. Their shields, if that's what they are, seem to bend light strangely around the hull. We think that's how they hid their approach for so long. And our own fleet? Asked the Secretary General, a tired-looking man named Aldrich Voss, who had aged 10 years in the last 3 hours. Sarah nodded to General Reyes. Oh, this was his moment, and he had been waiting 6 years for it, though probably not like this. 6 years ago, Reyes began, after the Europa signal incident, when we first detected structured radio signals from outside our system that were clearly not natural. A group of us in the Earth Defense Council made a decision. We didn't tell most of the world, because if we were wrong, we would have caused a panic for nothing, and if we were right, we needed time to work in secret. We began building a ship. Not a fleet. One ship, built to be worth an entire fleet on its own, using every piece of technology humanity had, plus a few things we borrowed from that same signal, once our scientists cracked its meaning. You're talking about the Prometheus Project, said the President of the United States, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena Vance, who was one of only 3 heads of state who had known the project's full scope from the start. I am, Reyes said. The ship has a real name now. Her crew gave it to her 3 months ago, when she was finally ready for her first full test flight. They call her the USS Earth. A murmur ran through the small window faces on the screen. Is she ready? Sarah asked, cutting straight to the only question that mattered. Reyes hesitated, just for a second. She's ready enough. We finished her weapons calibration 2 weeks ago. Her crew has trained together for 18 months. Her captain is one of the best officers this planet has ever produced. Is she ready to fight something that just conquered its way across who knows how many star systems? I don't know, Admiral. Nobody does. But she's what we have, and she's better than anything else in our arsenal by 100 times over. Sarah looked at each face on the screen in turn. We have 3 days to answer this Commander Vaskar Thren. I want opinions, and I want them fast, because I already know what I think we should do, and I want to hear if anyone disagrees before I say it out loud. Prime Minister Kenji Sato of Japan spoke first, his voice quiet but firm. If we refuse, he destroys us. If we accept, we lose 1 ship instead of a planet, and there's at least a chance. There's another option, said President Vance. We could try to negotiate. Buy time. Learn more about them before we commit to anything. Their message didn't sound like it left room for negotiation, said Aldrich Voss. No, Sarah agreed. It didn't. And every hour we spend trying to talk our way around this is an hour that Commander spends deciding we're stalling, which by his own words means he takes it as a refusal. I don't think this is a choice between fighting and not fighting. I think it's a choice between fighting on our terms, in a single battle we prepared for, or fighting on his terms, against 91 ships with no rules at all. The room was quiet for a long moment. I move that we accept the challenge, Sarah said. I move that we send the USS Earth. One by one, the faces on the screen nodded, some slowly, some without hesitation. It took 40 minutes of careful discussion before the final vote was called, but in the end, it was unanimous. Humanity would answer Vaskar Thren's challenge with the only ship built to answer it. Captain Marcus Reyes Jr. stood on the bridge of the USS Earth, looking through the massive forward viewport at the curve of the planet below. It was strange to think that somewhere down there, in a room full of screens and worried politicians, His own father had just agreed to send him into a fight that might be the most important battle in human history. The bridge around him was quiet, filled with the low hum of systems running at full readiness. His crew, 240 of the best men and women humanity had to offer, moved through their stations with calm efficiency. They had trained for this moment for a year and a half, though none of them had truly believed it would come so soon, or in this exact shape. "Captain," said his first officer, a broad-shouldered woman named Elena Cho, "we just received the formal orders. Command wants us underway within 6 hours." Marcus nodded slowly, still looking out at the earth below. He thought about his grandmother, who had grown up in a small village in the Philippines with no electricity, and how she used to tell him stories about the stars before anyone knew what waited among them. He thought about every human being who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. Now he knew, and in a matter of hours, he would carry humanity's answer to that question directly into the heart of it. "Signal command," Marcus said. "Tell them the USS Earth will be ready in 4 hours, not 6. And get Chief Engineer Lin up here. I want a full systems check before we so much as think about leaving orbit." "Yes, Captain." Marcus took one last look at the Earth, blue and green, and achingly beautiful against the black of space, and turned to face his crew. "All hands," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the ship's internal comm system. "This is the captain speaking. 3 hours ago, an alien commander named Vaskar Thren challenged the people of Earth to single combat, ship against ship, to decide the fate of our entire species. Our government has accepted that challenge. We are the ship they chose to answer it." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the ship. "I know some of you are afraid. I am too, and anyone who tells you they aren't is either lying or doesn't understand what we're about to do. But I also know this crew. I've trained with every one of you. I've seen what this ship can do, and I've seen what each of you can do when it matters most. We did not build the USS Earth to lose. We built her to make sure that whatever else happens in the history of this species, nobody could ever say we didn't stand up when it counted." He looked around the bridge at the faces of his officers, each one steady, despite the fear he knew was there underneath. "In 4 hours, we leave orbit. In a matter of days, we will meet Commander Vaskar Thren wherever he chooses to fight us, and we will show him exactly what this small, slow, clumsy species is truly capable of. Prepare the ship, prepare yourselves. Earth is counting on us." He cut the comm and turned back to the viewport one final time. "Elena," he said quietly, "send a message to the crew's families. Let them say goodbye, in case we don't come back to say it ourselves." "Already done, Captain," Elena Cho said softly. "I did it the moment we got the orders." Marcus nodded, grateful, and allowed himself exactly one moment of doubt, one moment to feel the full size of what was coming. Then he pushed it down, straightened his shoulders, and became, once again, simply the captain. "Then let's get to work," he said. "We have a war to answer, and I intend for us to win it." Behind him, on the massive tactical display that dominated one wall of the bridge, a countdown had already begun, marking the hours until the USS Earth would leave the safety of her homeworld and fly out to meet whatever Commander Vaskar Thren and the Jorath Dominion had waiting for her among the stars. 91 ships stood at the edge of the solar system, patient and confident, certain that this small young species would either fold quietly or die fighting, exactly as every other race the Dominion had tested before them. They had no idea what Earth had spent 6 years quietly building in secret, and they had no idea that in a few short days they were going to find out. 6 years before Commander Vaskar Thren's fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, a small research station on Europa picked up a signal that changed everything. It was not a message meant for Earth. It was a stray transmission, a piece of a much larger conversation happening somewhere far away, bounced and scattered across the stars, until a fragment of it reached a human antenna by pure chance. It took 18 months for scientists to prove the signal was not natural. It took another 6 months to translate even a small piece of it. What they found inside was not a greeting. It was a supply manifest, listing weapons, armor plating, and something the humans eventually understood to be a kind of drive system far beyond anything Earth had built. The moment that translation was confirmed, a very small group of people in the highest levels of government understood something the rest of the world did not yet know. Humanity was not alone. and whoever was out there had technology that made human spacecraft look like sailboats next to battleships. That was the night General Marcus Reyes Sr. proposed the Prometheus project. "We can't outbuild a civilization that's been in space for who knows how long," he told the small council that had gathered in a secure room beneath the Pentagon. "But we don't need to outbuild them. We need one ship. One ship that takes everything we've learned, everything we can reverse engineer from that signal, and everything our best minds can imagine, and puts it all into a single hull. If they ever come, we won't face them with a fleet of outdated ships. We'll face them with one ship built specifically to answer whatever they bring." It took 2 years just to agree on a design. It took another 3 years to build her, in secret, in a shipyard constructed inside a hollowed-out asteroid that had been quietly moved into a stable orbit beyond the moon, where no telescope from Earth or anywhere else was likely to notice. They called the shipyard Prometheus Station. They called the ship, once she finally took shape, the USS Earth. She was 2 kilometers long, built from a lattice of titanium composite alloy, layered with something the engineers had nicknamed ghost plating, a material that bent both light and radar around itself, making the ship far harder to detect than her size should have allowed. Her main engines used a fusion drive system based on principles borrowed from the Europa signal, giving her speeds that no human ship had ever come close to matching. Her weapons included rail cannons capable of firing solid slugs at a fraction of the speed of light, a set of experimental plasma lances built from technology partly understood and partly guessed at, and point defense systems fast enough to track and destroy incoming projectiles before they ever reached the hull. But her greatest weapon was not any single system. It was her crew. Captain Marcus Reyes Jr. had been handpicked for this command, from the day the ship was still just blueprints on a screen. He was the son of the general who had proposed the project, but nobody who served with him ever thought he had been given his post because of his father. Marcus had graduated top of his class at the Naval Academy, had flown combat missions during the brief but brutal Pacific Crisis 5 years earlier, and had a reputation for staying calm in situations that made other officers panic. When the Prometheus Council interviewed him for the captain's chair, he had said only one thing that mattered to them. "If we ever have to use this ship, it means everything else has already failed. I intend to make sure it doesn't fail on my watch." His first officer, Elena Cho, had been a submarine commander before transferring to the fledgling space fleet, and she brought with her a discipline and a coolness under pressure that balanced Marcus's more instinctive style perfectly. His chief engineer, Dr. Wei Lin, had helped design half the systems on the ship herself, and there was no problem the USS Earth could develop that Dr. Lin did not already have 3 ideas for solving. His tactical officer, a quiet, sharp-eyed man named David Okonkwo, had spent years running war games against imagined alien fleets, refining strategies for battles that, until 3 days ago, had existed only in simulations. 240 crew members in total, drawn from over 60 different countries, chosen not just for their skills, but for their ability to work together, under pressure none of them could truly train for. They had spent 18 months living aboard the ship, training constantly, running drill after drill, learning her systems until the ship felt less like a machine and more like an extension of their own bodies. None of them had ever expected to use her this soon. None of them had ever expected the invitation to come as a direct challenge to single combat either. But here they were. The USS Earth left orbit exactly 4 hours after Captain Reyes gave the order, slipping free of the planet's gravity well, with a grace that belied her enormous size. Behind her, dozens of smaller Earth Defense Fleet ships gathered in formation, not to join the fight, since the rules of the challenge forbade it, but to escort her part way, and to stand ready, in case the Jorath broke their own rules once the battle was over. "Course laid in, Captain," said the navigator, a young lieutenant named Priya Okafor, no relation to the colonel back at command, though the coincidence had caused a few jokes among the crew. The coordinates the Jorath fleet transmitted put the battlefield just past the orbit of Neptune, in open space. No planets, no moons, no debris fields, a clean fight. "How considerate of them," Elena Cho said dryly. "They probably don't want any accidents that might damage something they consider valuable," David Okonkwo said from the tactical station. "Neptune's moons, maybe, or they just don't want interference from Earth's other defenses. Either way, it plays to our advantage. Open space means our maneuverability and stealth systems matter more than they would in a cluttered fight. Marcus nodded, settling into the captain's chair at the center of the bridge. Then let's use every advantage we've got. Dr. Lin, how are the plasma lances holding up under the acceleration profile? Stable, Captain, came Lin's voice over the comm from engineering. Though I'd feel a lot better if we had another 6 months to run live fire tests instead of simulations. We don't have 6 months, Marcus said. We have about 60 hours before we reach the rendezvous point. Use every minute of it. Understood, Captain. As the USS Earth accelerated away from Earth, past the orbit of Mars, past the asteroid belt, past the massive shadow of Jupiter, the crew fell into the familiar rhythms of the drills they had run 100 times before. Except now, every drill carried the weight of knowing this was no longer practice. Marcus walked the length of the ship twice a day, stopping to talk with crew members at every station, not because he needed to check on their work, but because he understood that morale, in the coming days, would matter as much as any weapon system. He found Dr. Lin in engineering on the second day, elbow deep in an open panel beside the main plasma lance conduit, muttering to herself in a mixture of English and Mandarin. Problem? Marcus asked. Lin didn't look up. Not exactly a problem, just a worry. This whole ship is built on technology we half understand, borrowed from a stray radio signal we picked up by accident. Everything works in simulation. Everything worked in our test flights, but we've never actually fired these plasma lances at something that's firing back, at power levels that might exceed anything we tested for. Do you think she'll hold together? Lin finally looked up, wiping grease from her hands with a cloth. I think she's the best ship this species has ever built, Captain. I think I'd trust her with my life, because I am trusting her with my life. But I also think there's no such thing as a sure thing, and anyone who tells you otherwise before a first real battle is either a fool or a liar. Marcus allowed himself a small, tired smile. That's about the most honest thing anyone said to me all week. Thank you, Doctor. Don't thank me yet, Lin said, turning back to her panel. Thank me after we win. Far ahead of the USS Earth, at the edge of the solar system, the Zorath Dominion fleet waited in a loose formation around Commander Vaskar Thren's flagship, a massive vessel called the Ashen Crown. Vaskar Thren stood on his own bridge, watching a slow-moving dot on his tactical display that represented the approaching human ship. His second-in-command, a broad, scarred officer named Goran Vash, stood beside him, arms crossed over his chest plate. They accepted quickly, Goran said. Faster than most races do. They did, Vaskar agreed. It shows either great confidence or great desperation. I have seen both before, and they often look the same from a distance. Do you expect trouble from this ship? Vaskar considered the question carefully before answering. He had conquered, or overseen the testing of, 11 different species in his 400 years of service to the Dominion. Some had folded the moment they saw the size of his fleet. Some had fought bravely and died anyway, their outdated ships no match for Dominion technology built over centuries of expansion. A few, a very few, had shown surprising ingenuity, forcing real battles before ultimately losing. None had ever won. I expect this one ship to be their absolute best effort, Vaskar said. Young races often put everything they have into a single vessel when the stakes are this high. I have seen it before with the Threll and with the Ashkavi. Both built impressive ships for their level of technology. Both lost anyway, because impressive for a young race is still centuries behind what the Dominion has refined through generations of conquest. And if this human ship proves to be different? Vaskar's black eyes narrowed slightly, the closest expression his stretched features could manage to genuine curiosity. Then it will be the first truly interesting fight I have had in 80 years, Goran. And I confess, some small part of me almost hopes for that. 400 years is a very long time to keep winning the same battle. Goran said nothing to that. It was not his place to comment on his commander's private thoughts, and there was something in Vaskar Thren's tone that suggested he was not entirely joking. Position the Ashen Crown at the rendezvous coordinates, Vaskar said, turning back to the main viewport, and signal the rest of the fleet to hold their distance. This is a single combat, and I intend to honor that, at least until the outcome is decided. The Dominion's law exists for a reason. If we cheat the very races we test, the test means nothing. And eventually, Some race stronger than us will decide our word means nothing either. Understood, Commander. Vaskar Thren stood alone at the viewport for a long moment after Goran left to relay the orders, watching the distant, dim shape of the sun that warmed the human homeworld, a small yellow star among billions of others. He thought, briefly, of his own homeworld, conquered by the Dominion 4 centuries ago, when he had been young, and this same test had been given to his own people. His father had commanded that ship. His father had lost. And so Vaskar Thren had grown up under Dominion rule, had proven himself through decades of loyal service, had risen through the ranks not because he loved his conquerors, but because he understood, with the cold clarity of someone who had seen both sides of this exact moment. That strength was the only currency that mattered among the stars, and that his own people's failure to demonstrate enough of it 400 years ago was a debt he had spent his entire life trying to balance, one victory at a time. He did not expect the humans to succeed where his own ancestors had failed, but some quiet, private part of him, buried deep beneath 400 years of Dominion service, almost wished they would. 60 hours after leaving Earth orbit, the USS Earth arrived at the designated coordinates beyond Neptune's orbit, dropping out of her high-speed cruise into a careful, controlled approach. "There she is," David Okonkwo said quietly from the tactical station, as the massive shape of the Ashen Crown resolved on the main view screen, flanked at a respectful distance by the rest of the Jorath fleet, all of them holding position exactly as promised. The Ashen Crown was easily twice the length of the USS Earth, her hull a deep, blood-dark red streaked with black, covered in strange ridges and spines that gave her a look somewhere between a warship and a living creature. Weapon emplacements lined her sides in neat, precise rows, more than the USS Earth carried by a significant margin. "Captain," said Priya Okafor, "we're receiving a hail from the Jorath flagship." Marcus straightened in his chair. "Put it through." The view screen shifted, showing Vaskar Thren's stretched gray-green face once again, this time from much closer range. Behind him, Marcus could see Goran Vash and several other Zorath officers standing at attention. "So," Vaskar Thren said, his rough voice carrying an edge of genuine curiosity, "the humans sent one ship, as I expected. Tell me your name, Captain, so that I may record it properly, whatever the outcome of this battle." "Captain Marcus Reyes, of the USS Earth," Marcus said, keeping his voice level and calm, even as his heart hammered in his chest. "Commander Vaskar Thren, on behalf of the people of Earth, I accept your challenge, under the terms you set. Single combat, ship against ship. May it be decided fairly, and may both our peoples honor the outcome." Something that might have been respect flickered across Vaskar Thren's black eyes. "Well spoken, Captain Reyes. I have tested 11 races before yours, and few of their commanders spoke with such steadiness in this moment. Perhaps that is a good sign for your people. Perhaps it changes nothing at all. We will find out shortly." "We will," Marcus agreed. "One matter of honesty before we begin," Vaskar Thren said. "I do not expect you to win, Captain Reyes. In 400 years, no race has won this test on their first attempt. But I have learned, across those centuries, to respect courage, even in defeat, and something in the swiftness of your acceptance, and the calm in your voice now, tells me this may be a battle worth remembering, regardless of its ending." "Then let's find out together," Marcus said, "whether 400 years of history is about to change." Vaskar Thren's mouth curled into something that was not quite a smile, but was close enough to unsettle every human on the bridge who saw it. "Prepare your ship, Captain. We begin in 1 hour, exactly at the coordinates already provided. May your gods, if you have any, watch kindly over you." The screen went dark. For a long moment, the bridge of the USS Earth was utterly silent. "Well," Elena Cho finally said, breaking the tension, "he seems nice." A ripple of tense, grateful laughter ran through the bridge crew, cutting through the fear just enough to let everyone breathe again. Marcus stood from his chair and looked around at his crew, at the faces of the people who had trained beside him for 18 months, who had left their families and their homeworld behind to fly this ship into the most important battle in human history. 1 hour, he said. "Every station. Final checks. Dr. Lin, I want those plasma lances at 100%, and I want them there in 50 minutes, not 60. David," I want every possible tactic we've run in simulation pulled up and ready to reference the moment this fight starts moving. Elena, walk the ship. Let every crew member hear a friendly voice before this begins. Yes, Captain, came the answer, from all directions at once. Marcus turned back to the view screen, now showing the distant, waiting shape of the Ashen Crown, dark and massive against the stars, surrounded by 90 more ships that would not join the fight, but would watch every second of it. 400 years of history stood on the other side of that battlefield, an unbroken record of Dominion victories against every young race that had ever dared to answer their challenge. In 58 minutes, humanity was about to find out if that record was about to end. The hour passed slower than any hour Marcus Reyes had ever lived through. He spent the first 20 minutes walking the ship with Elena Cho, stopping at every station along the way. In the mess hall, he found a group of junior officers sitting quietly together, none of them eating, all of them watching a small screen showing the distant shape of the Ashen Crown. In the medical bay, he found Dr. Amara Osei, the ship's chief physician, checking and rechecking her equipment for the third time, though everything had already been checked twice that morning. Nervous, Doctor? Marcus asked. Terrified, Captain, Amara said honestly, not looking up from her instruments. But terrified people still do their jobs. I intend to be very good at my job today, whether I'm terrified or not. That's all any of us can do, Marcus said. He found Dr. Wei Lin in engineering, standing at the center of a room full of glowing displays, watching power readings flow across the plasma lance conduits with an intensity that suggested she was trying to memorize every number by heart. 50% charge and climbing steady, Captain, Lin said before he could even ask. We'll hit full charge with 8 minutes to spare before the deadline. Good work, Doctor. Don't thank me yet, Lin said, echoing her words from 2 days earlier. Thank me after. By the time Marcus returned to the bridge, there were 11 minutes left on the countdown. He settled into the captain's chair and looked around at his crew, each of them at their stations, faces tense but steady. David, he said, give me the tactical picture one more time. David Okonkwo pulled up a holographic display above the tactical station, showing the USS Earth and the Ashen Crown as two glowing points, separated by empty space. Their flagship outmasses us roughly 2-to-1, Captain. More weapon emplacements, more raw firepower per exchange, if this becomes a simple slugging match. But our scans show their hull materials, while thick, aren't structured the way ours are. Our ghost plating diffuses incoming energy across the whole hull, instead of absorbing it at a single point of impact. If we can force this into a longer engagement, instead of a quick decisive exchange, our design philosophy favors us. And if he doesn't let it become a longer engagement? Then it comes down to our maneuverability, David said. Our engines give us an edge in acceleration and turning radius that their much larger ship simply can't match. We can't outshoot a fully committed direct exchange, not against that much firepower. But we might be able to outfly it. Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing the information. Elena, how's the crew? Steady, Elena said. Scared, but steady. I think that's the best any of us can ask for right now. 2 minutes left. Marcus stood and faced the main view screen, where the shape of the Ashen Crown grew slightly larger and sharper as the ship's sensors refined their targeting locks. All hands, he said, his voice carrying through every corridor of the ship. This is the captain. In 2 minutes, we begin the most important battle in the history of our species. I won't pretend that isn't a heavy weight to carry, but I will say this. Every single person on this ship was chosen because they were the best humanity had to offer. Every system on this ship was built by the best minds our world has ever produced. Whatever happens in the next few hours, we are here because Earth believed we could do this, and I believe it too. Stations ready. Weapons hot. Let's show Commander Vaskar Thren exactly what a young, clumsy, slow species can do when everything is on the line. 30 seconds. Full power to shields and plasma lances, Marcus ordered. 10 seconds. Here we go, Elena murmured. The countdown reached 0, and across the empty space between the two ships, the Ashen Crown's weapon batteries lit up in a wave of dark red energy, the first shots of the battle streaking out toward the USS Earth. Marcus had run this exact scenario in simulation more times than he could count, but nothing had prepared him for how fast the Ashen Crown's opening barrage actually moved. David's evasive pattern kicked in a half-second before the shots arrived, the USS Earth rolling hard to port, as three massive bolts of red energy tore through the space where she had been a moment before. Direct hits avoided, David reported, but they adjusted their firing solution faster than our simulations predicted, recalculating our evasive pattern now. Return fire, Marcus ordered. Plasma lances. Target their forward weapon batteries. The USS Earth's own weapons answered, twin beams of blue-white energy lancing out across the gap and striking the Ashen Crown's hull near her bow. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a section of the alien ship's dark red plating buckled and glowed white-hot, venting a spray of atmosphere into the vacuum of space. Direct hit, David confirmed, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. Their shielding held, but our plasma lances punched through partially. That's more damage than their sensors probably expected us capable of dealing. On the bridge of the Ashen Crown, Vaskar Thren watched the same exchange with narrowed eyes. Goran Vash stood beside him, his usual calm replaced by something closer to surprise. "Commander, that weapon system," Goran said. "It shouldn't have penetrated our forward plating that easily." "No," Vaskar agreed slowly. "It shouldn't have. Increase power to forward shields. And adjust our firing pattern. This human captain moves his ship more precisely than our targeting computer anticipated." For the next 20 minutes, the two ships traded blows across the empty space beyond Neptune's orbit, each side probing the other's defenses, each side adjusting and readjusting their tactics in response. The USS Earth's superior maneuverability let her avoid the worst of the Ashen Crown's devastating firepower, weaving through space with a grace that made David Okonkwo's carefully rehearsed evasive patterns look almost like a dance. But the Jorath flagship's sheer number of weapon emplacements meant that even avoiding most shots still left the USS Earth absorbing glancing hits that gradually chipped away at her shields. "Shields at 78%, Priya Okafor reported, her voice tight with concentration as she monitored the ship's status. "Their shields are down to 61%, David countered from the tactical station. "We're winning the exchange, Captain, but slowly. At this rate, we might grind them down before they grind us down, but it's close, too close for comfort." Marcus gripped the arms of the captain's chair, watching the tactical display shift and update in real time. "Dr. Lin, how are the plasma lances holding up under sustained fire?" "Holding, Captain," Lin's voice came back, strained with effort. "But I'm having to actively cool the conduits between shots. We can't sustain full power fire indefinitely. Give me a window to let them recover fully, and I can give you a much stronger volley when you need it most." "Copy that. David, keep tracking. I want to know the moment an opening presents itself." For another 10 minutes, the battle continued in this careful, deadly rhythm, both ships probing for weakness, both crews growing more confident in their own systems, and more wary of their opponent's capabilities. On the Ashen Crown's bridge, Vaskar Thren watched the exchange with an expression that had shifted from cold confidence to something far more focused. "This ship is better than anything I have faced in 80 years, he admitted quietly to Goran Vash. "Their maneuverability is exceptional for a species this young. Their weapons, while smaller in number than ours, hit with a precision our shields were not designed to fully account for. Shall I recommend a change in tactics, Commander?" Vaskar Thren was quiet for a long moment, watching the USS Earth roll and twist through another volley of his ship's fire, avoiding the worst of it once again. Something like genuine respect had begun to creep into his cold black eyes, mixed with a growing, uncomfortable awareness that this battle might not follow the same script as the 11 that had come before it. "Yes," he said finally. "It is time to stop testing this crew gently, and time to show them what the Ashen Crown is truly capable of. Prepare the core lance." Goran Vash's head turned sharply toward his commander. "Commander, the core lance has never been used in a single combat test. It draws power from nearly the entire ship." "I am aware of what it draws, Goran," Vaskar said, his voice hardening. "I have led this fleet for 80 years, and in that time, I have never once needed to use our flagship's primary weapon against a single ship, because no single ship has ever forced my hand. This human vessel has forced my hand. Prepare it." "Yes, Commander." Back on the USS Earth, David Okonkwo's console suddenly flashed an urgent warning, and his eyes widened as he read the incoming sensor data. "Captain, we have a problem," he said, his voice sharper than Marcus had heard it all battle. The Ashen Crown is redirecting power from nearly every system across her hull into something at her bow. Weapons, shields, even life support in several sections, all of it feeding into a single point. What kind of weapon needs that much power? Marcus asked, already feeling a cold weight settle in his stomach. I don't know, Captain, David said, but based on the scale of the power draw, whatever it is, it's not designed to chip away at our shields like everything else they've fired so far. It's designed to end this fight in a single shot. On the main view screen, the massive shape of the Ashen Crown began to glow along her entire length, dark red energy gathering and concentrating toward a single enormous emitter at her bow, growing brighter and more terrible with every passing second. Time until it fires? Marcus demanded. 90 seconds, David said, maybe less. Marcus stared at the growing light on the view screen, at the terrible weight of what was gathering there, and understood, with sudden clarity, that everything the USS Earth had done in this battle so far had only been the opening move. The true test was about to begin. All hands, brace for evasive maneuvers, he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at the edges of his mind. Dr. Lin, I need everything you've got. David, find me a way out of whatever that thing is about to do, because I have a feeling we won't get a second chance if it hits us. 60 seconds, David Okonkwo said, his eyes fixed on the terrible growing light gathering at the bow of the Ashen Crown. Marcus's mind raced through every tactic they had drilled, every simulation they had run, searching for anything that might apply to a weapon this size, this powerful. David, can we outrun the blast radius? Unknown, Captain. We don't have enough data on its range or spread. If it's a focused beam, distance might not matter at all. If it's an area weapon, we need to get as far from that ship as physically possible in the next 50 seconds, and I'm not confident we can put enough distance between us in time. Then we need another option, Marcus said, forcing his voice to stay calm, even as his mind screamed at the shrinking countdown. Dr. Lin, status on the plasma lances? Fully charged, Captain. Lin's voice came back immediately. Whatever you need, they're ready. Marcus stared at the tactical display, at the growing light on the Ashen Crown's bow, and an idea began to form. Reckless and dangerous, but the only one that gave them any real chance at all. David, if that weapon fires in a straight line from its emitter, what happens if we're not in front of it when it goes off? David's fingers flew across his console, running rapid calculations. If it's a beam weapon, rather than an area weapon, moving off its firing axis should work, Captain. But the emitter looks capable of tracking, at least to some degree. We'd need to move fast enough, and unpredictably enough, that its tracking systems can't keep pace. Then that's what we do, Marcus said. Helm, bring us in close. Full burn. Direct approach toward the Ashen Crown. Then hard brake to starboard, the moment David gives the signal. Elena Cho's head snapped toward him. Captain, closing the distance puts us well within their conventional weapons' effective range. I know, Marcus said, but it also means less distance for that weapon's tracking systems to correct for, if my read on how directed energy works is right. A weapon built to devastate something far away is built for precision at range. Up close, fast, tight maneuvers should be harder for it to track, not easier. It was a gamble, built on a half-formed theory, tested only in the frantic mathematics of a desperate mind, but nobody on the bridge offered an alternative, because there wasn't one. 40 seconds, David said. Helm, execute, Marcus ordered. Full burn, now. The USS Earth surged forward, her engines flaring bright as she accelerated directly toward the looming shape of the Ashen Crown, closing the distance between the two ships, at a speed that pressed every crew member back into their seats, despite the ship's internal dampeners working at full capacity. On the Ashen Crown's bridge, Vaskar Thren watched the human ship's sudden, aggressive charge with something between alarm and reluctant admiration. They're closing the distance, Goran Vash said, surprise evident in his rough voice. Directly into our weapon's firing arc. No, Vaskar said slowly, understanding dawning in his black eyes. They're closing the distance to escape it. Clever. Adjust the core lance's tracking parameters for close-range targeting. Commander, the system wasn't designed for... Do it, Goran. Now. 20 seconds. The USS Earth screamed across the remaining distance between the two ships, closing to within a few kilometers of the Ashen Crown's massive hull, close enough now that the alien ship filled almost the entire forward viewport. 10 seconds, David called out. Captain, the emitter is still tracking us. They're adjusting for close range. Helm, hard brake, starboard, now. The USS Earth's engines flared violently as she wrenched into a brutal, punishing turn, her hull groaning under the stress of the sudden maneuver. On the view screen, the terrible light at the Ashen Crown's bow reached its peak brightness, and a beam of dark red energy, thick as a city block, tore out from the emitter and lanced through the space where the USS Earth had been only a fraction of a second before. The beam missed by less than 100 meters, close enough that the USS Earth's shields flared and crackled from the raw heat bleeding off the edge of the blast, close enough that half the crew felt their teeth vibrate from the sheer force of the near miss. Behind them, the beam continued on into open space, eventually striking a small, uncharted asteroid nearly 1,000,000 kilometers away and vaporizing it instantly. "We're alive," Elena Cho breathed, disbelief and relief mixing in her voice. "Shields at 41%, Priya reported. "That was close, Captain, too close." Marcus allowed himself exactly one breath of relief before turning his attention back to the tactical display. "David, status on the Ashen Crown?" "Their core lance needs time to recharge, Captain," David said, studying his readouts. "Based on the power draw we tracked, I'd estimate at least 10 minutes before they can fire it again. Possibly longer, given how much of their ship's systems it consumed. Then we hit them, now, while every other system on that ship is still recovering from feeding that weapon," Marcus said. "Dr. Lin, full power to the plasma lances. Target their engine section, and target it precisely. If we can cripple their mobility, while their shields are still down from that discharge, we take away their ability to control the range of this fight." "Copy that, Captain," Lin said, redirecting now. The USS Earth spun hard, bringing her plasma lances to bear on the Ashen Crown's rear engine section, still glowing faintly from the after effects of powering the massive core lance. Twin beams of blue-white energy tore across the gap between the ships and struck home, this time punching deep into the weakened plating around the alien ship's primary drive. An explosion bloomed along the Ashen Crown's flank, venting debris and atmosphere in a bright, silent burst. "Direct hit," David confirmed, a note of fierce satisfaction cutting through his usual calm. "Their main engine cluster is losing power output, Captain. Their maneuverability just dropped significantly." On the Ashen Crown's bridge, alarms blared across every console as damage reports flooded in. Goran Vash fought to keep his footing as the ship shuddered from the impact. "Commander, we've lost 30% of our primary engine output," he reported grimly. "Maneuverability is severely compromised." Vaskar Thren stood very still amid the chaos of his own bridge, watching the tactical display with an expression that had shifted, once again, into something entirely new. Not anger, not fear. Something closer to genuine, startled respect. "In 400 years," he said quietly, almost to himself, "no ship has ever struck the Ashen Crown this hard. Commander, your orders?" Vaskar Thren was silent for a long moment, watching the human ship pull away, repositioning for another attack run, her captain clearly recognizing the advantage this moment offered, and moving to press it before the Jorath flagship could recover. "We fight on," Vaskar said finally, his voice hardening with resolve. "Bring auxiliary weapon batteries to full power. If our engines are compromised, we make our stand here and now, and we make them pay for every meter of ground they take from us." The next 20 minutes of the battle were the most brutal the USS Earth's crew had yet endured. With her engines damaged, the Ashen Crown could no longer maneuver to avoid the human ship's attacks as effectively, but she compensated with a furious, near-constant barrage from every remaining weapon battery along her hull, forcing the USS Earth to weave and dodge through an almost unbroken wall of incoming fire. "Shields at 26%, Priya called out, strain evident in her voice as she fought to keep the ship's defenses balanced across the incoming assault. "Their shields are down to 18%, David countered. "But Captain, at this rate of exchange, we're both going to run out of shields around the same time, and I don't like our odds in a straight trade after that point. Their hull is simply larger and tougher than ours." Marcus gripped the arms of his chair, watching the tactical display shift and flicker as both ships traded devastating blows across the shrinking distance between them. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the ship's climate controls working at full capacity. "Dr. Lin," he called out, "I need something. Anything. We can't win a straight war of attrition against a ship twice our size." There was a pause on the comm, filled only with the distant sound of alarms and shouted status reports from engineering. Then Lin's voice came back, tight with concentration but carrying a spark of sudden inspiration. "Captain, their core lance," she said. "It drew power from nearly every system on that ship, including, based on our scans during the discharge, a portion of their shield generators. If they're forced to reroute power again under combat stress, there might be a window." "What kind of window?" "If I can get a precise enough reading on their power distribution in real time," Lin said, "I might be able to time a strike to hit them at the exact moment their systems are least protected. But I'd need David's targeting data synced perfectly with my power analysis, and we'd have maybe a 2-second window to act." "David?" Marcus asked. "I can do it, Captain," David said, already pulling up new calculations on his console. "But I need Dr. Lin feeding me live data, and I need the helm to hold us steady on a firing line for those 2 seconds, which means no evasive maneuvers during the window." "That's a risk." Marcus looked at the tactical display, at the punishing exchange of fire still raging around both ships, at the slowly ticking countdown on both vessels' shield strength, and made his decision. "Do it," he said. "Elena, prepare the helm to hold steady on David's mark, no matter what's coming at us in that moment. Dr. Lin, David, find me that window." "Working on it, Captain," Lin said. For nearly 3 minutes, the USS Earth continued her desperate dance through the Ashen Crown's fire, shields dropping steadily lower with every exchange, while Lin and David worked in tense coordination, watching the enemy ship's power signature for the telltale fluctuation that would signal their opportunity. "There," Lin said suddenly. "Captain, they're diverting power to their forward weapon batteries for another heavy volley. Their shield generators just dropped to a fraction of normal output for a 3-second window." "David, mark it," Marcus ordered. "Marking now," David said, his voice tight with focus. "Helm, hold steady, on my count. 3, 2, 1, fire." Every weapon system on the USS Earth fired at once. Plasma lances, rail cannons, and every point defense turret that could be angled toward the target, all converging on a single precise point along the Ashen Crown's hull, where David's calculations indicated her shields had thinned to almost nothing. The combined barrage tore through the weakened section like a hammer through glass, punching deep into the alien ship's superstructure and detonating something critical far beneath the surface. A massive explosion rippled along the Ashen Crown's flank, venting debris, atmosphere, and bright arcs of raw energy into the void of space. The great ship shuddered violently, her forward weapon batteries falling silent one by one as the damage cascaded through her systems. On the Ashen Crown's bridge, Vaskar Thren was thrown from his feet as the ship rocked beneath the impact, alarms screaming from every console around him. Goran Vash hauled him upright, both of them staring in stunned disbelief at the damage reports flooding in. "Commander," Goran said, his voice hoarse with shock, "we've lost 60% of our forward weapons. Shield generators are offline. Main power core is showing critical stress fractures." Vaskar Thren stared at the tactical display, at the small, battered, but still flying shape of the USS Earth, and felt something he had not felt in 400 years of service to the Dominion. He felt the cold, unmistakable weight of a battle slipping away from him. Aboard the USS Earth, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the Ashen Crown drifted, wounded and smoking, her forward weapon batteries dark and silent, for the first time since the battle began. "Captain," David Okonkwo said, his voice careful, almost disbelieving, "their main power core is showing critical stress. If they take one more significant hit, there's a real chance it goes critical entirely." Marcus stared at the tactical display, at the broken shape of the ship that had, only minutes earlier, seemed unstoppable. Part of him, the part that had spent 18 months training for exactly this moment, wanted to press the advantage immediately, to end the fight decisively before the Ashen Crown could recover, and turn the tables once again. But another part of him, quieter but no less certain, remembered the words Vaskar Thren had spoken before the battle began. May it be decided fairly, and may both our peoples honor the outcome. This had never been a fight to the death. It had been a test, and the USS Earth had just delivered a blow that no ship in 400 years of Dominion history had ever managed to land. "Hold fire," Marcus said quietly. Elena Cho turned to look at him, surprise plain on her face. "Captain?" "Their power core is compromised," Marcus said. "One more hit from us could destroy that ship entirely, and I don't think that's what this test was ever meant to be. We came here to prove Earth deserves to stand as a free and independent people. We didn't come here to commit a massacre, hold fire, and open a channel to their bridge." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Priya Okafor nodded and began working her console. "Channel open, Captain." The view screen flickered, showing the interior of the Ashen Crown's bridge, smoke drifting through the air, sparks falling from a damaged overhead panel, alarms still blaring somewhere in the background. Vaskar Thren stood amid the wreckage of his own command deck, one hand braced against a console, blood, dark purple in color, trickling from a cut along his temple. Goran Vash stood beside him, badly favoring one arm. "Captain Reyes," Vaskar Thren said, his rough voice steady despite everything. "I confess, I did not expect to be speaking to you again from this position." "Commander Thren," Marcus said, "your ship is critically damaged. We have the advantage right now, and we could end this fight. But I don't believe that's what this test was ever supposed to be about, and I think you know that as well as I do." Vaskar Thren was quiet for a long moment, studying the human captain's face through the view screen with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. "You are correct, Captain," Vaskar said finally. "The test exists to determine whether a young race possesses the strength, the ingenuity, and the will to stand among the stars as equals, not to determine how thoroughly we can destroy those who fail it. You have already answered that question beyond any doubt I could reasonably hold. Your ship struck the Ashen Crown harder in this single battle than any vessel from any of the 11 races I have tested before yours, combined." "Then it's over," Marcus said. "It is," Vaskar Thren agreed. "By the ancient law of the Dominion, when a single combat test results in critical damage to the testing vessel without the destruction of the challenged ship, the challenged race is recognized as a true starfaring people, free and independent, owed no tribute, subject to no rule but their own. Your people have passed the test, Captain Reyes. Earth stands free." A wave of quiet, disbelieving relief swept through the bridge of the USS Earth. Elena Cho closed her eyes briefly, and Marcus saw her lips move in a silent prayer of thanks. Priya Okafor's hands trembled slightly at her console. David Okonkwo simply sat back in his chair, letting out a long, slow breath he seemed to have been holding for the entire battle. Marcus allowed himself one moment to feel the full weight of what had just happened, the years of secret work, the 18 months of training, the desperate, brilliant improvisation that had turned the tide of an impossible fight, all of it culminating in these 4 simple words: Earth stands free. "Thank you, Commander," Marcus said quietly, "for honoring your own law, even now." "Do not thank me for simple honesty, Captain," Vaskar Thren said. "The Dominion's law exists precisely because a test that can be cheated by the tester is no test at all, merely conquest wearing a different mask. I have upheld that law faithfully for 400 years, and I will not break it now simply because, for the first time in my long service, I have lost." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "For your fleet? For your ship?" "My fleet will withdraw from your system, as our law requires," Vaskar Thren said. "The Ashen Crown will need extensive repairs, which we will conduct at our own expense, far from your worlds. Your people will not see the Dominion again for 100 of your years, per the terms of the original challenge, and after that, should we return, it will be as equals seeking trade and alliance, not as conquerors testing a young race's worth. You have already answered that question, Captain Reyes, more thoroughly than any people I have encountered in 4 centuries of service." Marcus nodded slowly, still absorbing the enormity of what had just occurred. "And you, Commander? What happens to you, after a defeat like this?" For the first time since the battle began, something that might have been genuine warmth flickered across Vaskar Thren's stretched alien features. "That is a strange question for a victor to ask a defeated enemy, Captain, but I will answer it honestly. My own people were conquered by the Dominion 400 years ago, in a battle much like this one, except my people's ship did not survive to see this moment. My father commanded that ship. He did not have the honor of losing gracefully, because he did not survive long enough to lose at all. The bridge of the USS Earth fell silent, the weight of Vaskar Thren's words settling over everyone who heard them. I have spent 400 years in service to the very empire that conquered my homeworld, Vaskar Thren continued, rising through its ranks, proving my worth through decades of loyal service, because in this galaxy, strength is the only currency that earns a people the right to determine their own future. Today, for the first time, I watched a young race prove that same strength against me, and prove it well enough that I could not, in good conscience, claim victory I had not truly earned. There is no shame in that, Captain Reyes. There is only the truth of what happened here today, and I find I am not entirely sorry to have witnessed it. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a complicated mixture of triumph and unexpected sympathy for the alien commander who had, only hours earlier, been prepared to conquer his entire species without a second thought. For what it's worth, Commander, Marcus said, I hope your people find their own moment like this one someday, a chance to stand free again, on their own terms. Vaskar Thren studied the human captain for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his black eyes. That is a generous sentiment from a man who, 1 hour ago, I intended to defeat without mercy. Perhaps your species has more to teach the galaxy than mere strength of arms, Captain Reyes. Perhaps that, too, is part of what makes a race worthy of standing among the stars. Safe travels, Commander, Marcus said. I hope the next time our peoples meet, it's under better circumstances than these. As do I, Captain, Vaskar Thren said. The Dominion honors its word. Earth is free. The screen went dark, and slowly, across the tactical display, the massive shape of the Ashen Crown began to withdraw, followed at a respectful distance by the 90 other ships of the Jorath fleet, none of which had fired a single shot during the entire battle, exactly as their own law had demanded. The news reached Earth 12 hours later, carried by a tight beam transmission from the USS Earth back to Earth Defense Command, and from there, it spread across the planet faster than any news in human history ever had. Fleet Admiral Sarah Cade stood in the same command center where she had first watched Commander Vaskar Thren's challenge 3 days earlier, now surrounded by cheering officers, analysts, and support staff, all of them celebrating a victory that, until a few hours earlier, none of them had truly dared to hope for. They did it, Colonel James Okafor said, disbelief and joy mixing in his voice as he watched the confirmed transmission scroll across his screen. Admiral, they actually did it. Sarah allowed herself a rare, genuine smile, watching the celebration unfold around her. They did, she agreed quietly. Get me a channel to the Secretary General, and to every head of state on our earlier call. The whole world needs to hear this, and they need to hear it from someone who can explain exactly what it means. Within hours, the news broke publicly, across every corner of the globe. Humanity was not alone in the universe, had never truly been alone, and now stood recognized, by the very empire that had come to test them, as a free and independent people among the stars. The initial shock of learning about the existence of the Jorath Dominion, and the danger the challenge had represented, was tempered almost immediately by the extraordinary, undeniable fact of victory. People filled streets in celebration in every major city on the planet. Governments that had spent 3 tense days preparing contingency plans for potential conquest instead found themselves drafting the first tentative frameworks for how humanity might someday engage with a wider galactic community. Aboard the USS Earth, still holding position at the coordinates where the battle had taken place, the crew allowed themselves their first real moment of rest in days. In the mess hall, exhausted officers gathered together, some laughing with the giddy relief of survivors, some sitting quietly, simply grateful to be alive. Marcus found Dr. Wei Lin in engineering, finally sitting down for the first time in what looked like hours, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in her hand. We did it, Marcus said, settling into the seat beside her. We did, Lin agreed, a tired but genuine smile crossing her face. Though I'll admit, Captain, there were a few moments in that fight where I genuinely thought we wouldn't. Me too, Marcus admitted. More than a few, if I'm honest. That timing window on their shield generators, Lin said, shaking her head slowly. David and I had maybe 4 seconds to identify it, confirm it, and calculate a targeting solution. If we'd been a single second slower, that whole plan falls apart, and I genuinely don't know what we'd have tried next. But you weren't a second slower, Marcus said. None of you were. Every single person on this ship performed exactly the way we trained for 18 months to perform, and it was enough. That's not luck, Doctor. That's the result of a lot of very hard work, done by a lot of very capable people. Lynn was quiet for a moment, staring down at her cold coffee. Do you think Commander Thren meant what he said? About honoring the outcome, about his people, about hoping his own homeworld gets a chance like ours someday. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. I think he spent 400 years serving an empire that conquered his people, doing whatever it took to survive and rise within it. I think today, for the first time in a very long time, he saw something that reminded him what it might look like for a people to win instead of lose. I choose to believe he meant every word. That's a generous read on someone who came here to conquer us 3 days ago. Maybe, Marcus said. But I'd rather be generous and wrong than bitter and right, if the alternative is carrying that bitterness into whatever comes next for humanity. We just proved we can stand up for ourselves when it matters. I'd like to think we can also choose, when the moment allows it, to be decent about how we do it. 3 days later, the USS Earth returned to orbit above her home planet, moving slowly, her battle scars still visible along her hull, despite the crew's best efforts at emergency repairs during the return journey. Below her, the blue and green curve of Earth looked exactly as it always had, unaware, from a purely visual standpoint, of just how close it had come to a very different fate. Marcus stood once again at the same viewport where he had stood 5 days earlier, looking down at his homeworld, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle into something he suspected would take a very long time to fully process. Elena Cho joined him quietly, standing at his side without speaking for a long moment. How does it feel? She finally asked, being the captain who saved the world? Marcus almost laughed at the phrase, though there was little genuine humor in it. I didn't save the world, Elena. 240 people saved the world, working together, doing their jobs better than anyone had a right to expect from a species that only just learned it wasn't alone in the universe 5 days ago. I just happened to be sitting in the chair when it mattered. That's a very captain-like answer, Elena said, a faint smile crossing her face. Modest, and mostly true, but not entirely. What's the untrue part? The part where you make it sound like anyone else could have sat in that chair and made the same calls you made, Elena said. I've served with a lot of officers, Marcus. I've never served with one who could have held this crew together, through what we just went through, made the calls you made, at the speed you made them. Take the credit you're owed. You earned it. Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking down at the earth below, at the countless lights of countless cities, all of them filled with people who, 5 days ago, had no idea their entire future rested on the outcome of a battle fought at the edge of the solar system. We're not alone anymore, Elena, he said quietly. Not in the way we thought we understood before. There's a whole galaxy out there, full of empires and rules and tests like the one we just passed. This isn't the end of something. It's the beginning. Are you ready for that? Elena asked. Marcus thought about Vaskar Thren's parting words, about a homeworld conquered 4 centuries ago, about an alien commander who had spent his entire life trying to balance a debt of failure that was never truly his own to carry. He thought about the strange, unexpected sympathy he had felt for an enemy who had come to conquer his species and left, instead, with something that looked almost like respect. I don't know if anyone can be fully ready for something like this, Marcus said finally. But I know this crew, and I know this ship, and I know that whatever comes next, whatever tests or threats or opportunities this galaxy sends our way, Earth is going to face them the same way we faced Commander Vaskar Thren, together and without backing down. Below them, the Earth turned slowly in its endless orbit, exactly as it had for billions of years before this moment, and would continue to for billions of years after. But something fundamental had changed in the last 5 days, something that would ripple outward through human history for generations to come. Humanity had met the wider galaxy for the first time, had been tested in the oldest and harshest way that galaxy knew how to test a young species, and had answered that test not with fear, not with surrender, but with the same stubborn, inventive courage that had carried the species up out of caves, across oceans, and finally, into the stars themselves. The USS Earth had entered the battlefield as humanity's answer to an impossible challenge. She returned home as the first proof of what humanity could become, now that the rest of the galaxy finally knew its name. And somewhere far beyond the edge of the solar system, aboard a battered ship called the Ashen Crown, Commander Vaskar Thren watched the small, distant yellow star that warmed the human homeworld fade slowly into the darkness behind him, and allowed himself, for the first time in 400 years, to hope that somewhere among the stars, his own people might one day find a moment exactly like the one he had just witnessed. The end.